Okay, we are going to go live. How are you doing, everybody? Chuck Holton here. Thank you for watching the live stream that we're doing here from CBN News. We do this nightly out of Israel. I'm in Jerusalem right now. That's the lovely skyline back there. And as a matter of fact, if I turn this light down a little bit, it'll look even better. Let's see if I'll try that. There, that looks nicer. I've had a busy day. I didn't get a chance to make it to the gym today, and I'm kind of sad about that. But I am happy to be here tonight and to have some things to talk to you about, and especially since what I have to talk to you about is, in many ways, good news. So what do you want first? I got bad news and I got good news. The good news is you're going to like a lot. So what do you prefer? You want bad news first or good news first? Let's go with bad news first. Bad news first is that Hamas has apparently decided to reject the ceasefire proposal that was being put forward by, well, the United States and Qatar and Egypt. The third parties are the ones that put this peace deal forward. Israel agreed to it, to the tenets of it in principle, at least, enough to move forward. And then they sent it to Hamas, and Hamas had to find Yahya Sinwar. And so apparently maybe they were able to do that. We still haven't heard anything from Yahya Sinwar or about him directly. But if they gave us an answer, or gave us, I'm here as a journalist, if they gave the Israelis an answer, then apparently they got a hold of Sinwar. And so that's two things of not so good news. Number one, that they were able to get a hold of Sinwar, and number two, that they were, so it's just an ambulance. Two ambulance and a cop. You see that back there? Yeah. So the bad news is that they were able to get a hold of Sinwar, and that they rejected the ceasefire proposal. It sounds like Hamas it feels like it would benefit from a wider war in the Middle East. Let's get more people involved in shooting it at Israel, and maybe they'll lighten up on Gaza. Maybe that's the thought process. And since the Iranians have been dangling the threat of World War III over the whole proceedings, Hamas might see this as an opportunity to go, hey, maybe we should just reject everything and get ourselves a wider war, and that might allow us to actually survive. Perhaps. Maybe that's what they're thinking. But we don't know. All we know is that they have rejected the ceasefire proposal, and so we'll have to see what happens now. Okay, so the good news is I went to Sderot today. It's about an hour and a half drive south of here. And as you know, Sderot, along with most of the south, has been evacuated for 10 months since the attacks. And it went from a city of 34,000 people to about 5,000 people. Only about 5,000 people stayed after the evacuation order. And the rest of those 29,000 people came to hotels around the country and were getting a stipend from the government to make up for the loss of wages because they couldn't go to work. And so they had, a place to stay and food to eat and a little bit of money. But a lot of people lost their businesses. If you're a small business owner, getting a small stipend from the government when you can't open your business isn't much of a, it's not much help. So those 29,000 people apparently are now going to have to go home, because the Israeli government announced last week that it would not continue paying those stipends for people to stay in a hotel. Now, I'm curious. I'd like for you to comment in the comments section here and tell me how you feel about this. If it was you, you have the very, the mixed blessing, let's put it that way, of the Israeli government paying for you to stay in this hotel over here. That's a good thing because you got a roof over your head and food to eat, but it's a not good thing because you and your 4 kids are all crammed into one room in the hotel, and you can't go to work. And so you're just kind of laying around, just, what do we do? So that being the case, what would you prefer? Would you rather go home and face the danger of potentially another October 7th attack? Or would you trust that the IDF has degraded the Hamas fighters enough that another October 7th attack is not imminent? Or would you say, no, heck no, I'm not going back there? And so maybe let's do a poll. Maybe we can do a poll here. Start a poll. Okay. Would you go back to live in Sderot? I'm going to ask about Sderot specifically because, it's a small town. It's right on the border. We're just doing a thought exercise. I'll say yes, no, maybe, or depends, and not the diapers. Okay, so we'll see what you have to say about that. We'll put the poll up. Now, just a little more about Sderot to kind of help you in your thinking. Again, town of 34,000 people at one time. It's fairly close to the beach, 20-minute drive from the beach, and it has received thousands of rockets over the last, since 2001, I believe, was the first rocket that was fired out of Gaza by Hamas happened in 2001. And since then, they've had thousands of rockets, tens of thousands, fired out of Gaza, not just at Sderot, but at the entirety of Israel. As a matter of fact, they've had rockets that have hit as far north as Haifa. So they had at least rockets that could strike anywhere in Israel. And they used them. They used them on a regular basis. If you go back to pre-October 7th, it was a weekly, if not daily, occurrence to have rockets coming from Gaza. And so the people in Sderot just got so used to it that they just would step into the bomb shelter when the siren went off. And once the rocket hit, then they'd come out and they'd go around their business. They say that Sderot has more bomb shelters per capita than any other city on planet Earth. And I believe it because I was there today, and every 50 yards down the road, every road, there's an outdoor bomb shelter. Every bus stop is a bomb shelter. At the playgrounds, they'll have 5 or 6 bomb shelters scattered around, literally at like every 100 feet. There are bomb shelters in every home, mandated. You have to have a bomb shelter in your home. So it just got to the point where between the bomb shelters and the Iron Dome system, people didn't worry that much about it. Now, there have been people killed. 27 people have been killed in Sderot since 2001 by rockets, and dozens have been injured. So that's, maybe about one a year. The interesting thing that I found out when I was doing some research on this is that on October 7th, Hamas fired more than 5,000 rockets out of Gaza as cover so that they could break through the fence and come in, and it worked. It made everybody go into their bomb shelters and sit there and wait for the large barrage of rockets to be over, which just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And so nobody was outside looking around and going, hey, wait a minute, there's somebody breaking through the fence. It was very well planned and orchestrated. But how many people in that, Scott Estep, hey buddy, Scott is watching and says some people never left and still live there, as I understand. Yes, that's right. About 5,000 people stayed in Sderot and never left. So a town of 35,000, 34,000 down to 5,000. And Oscar and I actually went down there in October, November of last year and visited, and there were still rockets coming all the time. We had to wear body armor as soon as we got close to the border. When all the time we were in Sderot, we were there with Victor Marks and his wife Eileen. We were wearing body armor the whole time, helmets, and everywhere you went, you had to keep that on until you got much further north. So One Tired Mama says, would they have locks on the shelters and be able to carry arms? Okay, that's a very good question. One of the huge drawbacks that they ran into on October 7th was they all stepped into the bomb shelters. Rockets are flying, 5,000 rockets or plus coming out of Gaza. And a lot of those bomb shelters don't even have doors on them. And so then they're in there, and all of a sudden a terrorist shows up with a hand grenade and tosses it in the bomb shelter. And listen, inside of a small concrete structure with no windows or anything would be the worst place to be if a grenade got thrown in there. And many people died in those bomb shelters because they didn't have doors, or the doors that they had were not able to be locked or able to be bolted. You know, they weren't bulletproof. And so the terrorists had free reign. They just went door to door to door and went to each bomb shelter, ripped open the door or blew open the door and killed all the people inside. So one thing I noticed with the bomb shelters now is that many of them have been retrofitted to have large bulletproof doors on them. When they put the bomb shelters in, they never imagined that that would be an issue, because they figured that if terrorists broke through the fence, there would be brigades of IDF on the way immediately and would fight them off and would kill them. As it turned out, that really wasn't the case, and it was up to a lot of the civilians and just what few soldiers were around or police were around to fight the terrorists. One of the first things that the terrorists did on October 7th was the guy strapped on a suicide vest ran into the main police station in Sderot and detonated his vest and killed 20 police officers and flattened the building. So that made it much easier for those terrorists to just rampage through Sderot. They killed another 80, I think 50 to, let's see, 20 police officers and 50 civilians. So they killed another 50 civilians in Sderot, wounded many more. I interviewed a guy right here across the street who was shot in Sderot on that day. Thought he was going to die. He was a rabbi. So obviously that security plan actually worked against the Israelis on October 7th. So now many of the bomb shelters and safe rooms have been retrofitted with bulletproof doors and much better locks. So if that's the case, I mean, look, for our polls purposes, if we say, would you go back? Let's assume that you have the ability to fix your safe room up so that it would be truly safe from home invaders as well as rockets. Now, somebody was asking about the ability to carry weapons. So the ability to carry weapons exists in Israel, of course, and it is what it takes to be able to carry weapons has changed a lot over the years. But on October 6th, you had, if you wanted a gun permit, if you wanted a permit to carry a firearm on your person, you had to prove that you had some sort of threat against you. And ironically, nobody in Sderot, your average person in Sderot, and even Be'eri and the other kibbutzim that were right along the border with Gaza, did not qualify for a firearms permit on that basis. Because the government didn't believe there was that much of a threat, and so they wouldn't give them gun permits. Now many of them did have guns because they live in, especially out on the kibbutzim, they live out in the country, they're farmers and stuff, they need guns for, shooting at pigeons and whatever. So many more of those had guns, but also many of them could have gotten guns, but chose not to because that area was populated heavily by extremely left-wing, liberal, I would say now, in hindsight, very easy to say, somewhat Pollyannic people who believed that if we're just nice enough to the Palestinians, then they'll leave us alone. And they even were nice enough to give the Palestinians jobs in their homes. And thousands of Palestinians crossed the border every day and came into that region to work and to do, menial jobs and things like that. But they could make 5 times as much in Israel as they could in Gaza. And so 3 times as much. And so they were happy to come across, but they were also gathering information that they were passing on to Hamas. This is another reason why many people say, especially in that area in Sderot now, will say, I don't have any sympathy for what the Gazans are going through, because we extended a hand of friendship to them and they bit that hand hard. And I'm not just talking about Hamas fighters, I'm talking about the civilians as well. And so now, the rocket attacks out of Gaza have diminished, and they've diminished greatly. So in 2021, there were about 10 rockets fired on average out of Gaza every single day. That's 2021. And of course, 2023 was skewed by the fact that in one day, they fired off more than 5,000. There was another incident, forget what year that was, where they fired like 11,000, 4,000 rockets in 11 days or something like that. That was the worst up until October 7th. But since the war started, the number of rockets coming out of Gaza has diminished month over month, more or less. There have been some flare-ups. There have been some times, even in the last couple days, where rockets have flown out of Gaza. So they haven't gotten all of them yet. But if you were used to living in Sderot up until October 6th, you were used to rockets coming in on a daily or weekly basis. And now, other than the couple of incidents we've had in the last few days, they didn't have any rockets in Sderot since May, coming out of Gaza. So, or maybe even April. And so, if you are a Sderotian, how would you call a citizen of Sderot? A Sderotian? Anyway, whatever you would call them. If you were used to living in Sderot in normal times, normal being up until October 7th, then living there now would seem positively blissful, super quiet, because, again, just very few rockets coming in anymore. And there are still troops in contact inside Gaza. So when we were in Sderot today, we went up on a hilltop, and there's a overlook that is built looking into Gaza on the southern end of Sderot. And it's been closed ever since the war started because there were troops up there, and so we couldn't get up there. So we had to go to a little bit lower spot if you're a journalist that was kind of a few hundred yards away. But this vantage point is now back open and has been for several weeks. And so there were a lot of people that were coming up there to just peer into Gaza because it's got one of those 100x binocular things on a stand. You pay money and you can look through the binoculars. And so we did that. We went up there and I looked through the binoculars. I'll put some footage of that over on chuckholton.com if you want to see what it looks like in Beit Hanun, the closest neighborhood inside Gaza, which is only 1 mile from where I was standing. And I'll just tell you, it's a wreck. There's not a lot left standing in Beit Hanun. You can see a lot of buildings further out and in Gaza City, which is further to the south. So you got Beit Hanun, Jabalia, and Gaza City. You can see lots of buildings that are still intact, hundreds and hundreds of buildings that are still intact, still standing. I don't know what shape they're in, but they're not rubble. But closer in Beit Hanun, closer to the fence, it's literally all just piles of rubble. That whole neighborhood is gone, and understandably so, because there's some glass panes in there's a little monument up there on that overlook because of another battle that took place between Hamas and Israel, and so it kind of commemorates that, and it's a memorial up there and everything. And one of those glass panes or two of them had bullet holes in them from Gaza. And so it's a mile away. That means there were snipers that were shooting shooting at that hilltop after the war started. And, so it's understandable they had that thing closed. And it's understandable that Israel decided to flatten Beit Hanun because virtually every building in Beit Hanun was militarized in some way. It was very interesting to stand up there and to talk to people who came up. There was a group from Indonesia, some women that had come from Indonesia, and they brought a guitar, and I was like, what's the guitar for? And they went over and they stood and raised their hands toward Gaza and started praying, and then they started singing, and then they started speaking in tongues, and they were hopping around and they were singing songs and just praising God up there and asking God to release the hostages from Gaza, asking him to bring an end to this war. And that was pretty cool. Got to interview a couple of them, talk to them a little bit. Real nice ladies. Strange though, we've got people from Indonesia, groups from Indonesia, which is a primarily Muslim country, coming to Israel to stand with Israel in this time. I don't see any American groups doing that. And there probably are, I just haven't run into them. But the last group of Indonesians I saw was over 100 people, and that was just last week. It was a separate group from the one we saw today. So they were up there praising God, praying, singing, and then I got a chance to talk to their tour guide who is from the area, and I have just a quick sound bite I want to play for you of what he had to say about people coming back to that area. So take a listen. No, that's not it.
Now it's safe. Now it's safe because the Israeli army is inside and they not let him to shoot to the Israeli settlements. The people that are already started to come back to the road from around three months ago. Most of the people, about 80% already. 80% they are already back. The success will be when all the people which they are kidnapped to Gaza, they will be back at home.
So if that guy Moshe was voting in our poll, he would likely vote no on going back to Sderot. His thought was we should not go back until this is over, until this is completely done and we have wiped out Hamas in Gaza and not the simple fact that there are fewer missiles coming in than normal doesn't mean that we should be okay with that. And I think that's a interesting point of view there, that some people would say, well, hey, you got a lot fewer missiles coming into Sderot now than you did before the war even started, so you should be happy, you should go home. And some people, a lot of people, are saying, no, I'm not going to go home. I say a lot. So as far as I can tell, the number of people that have come back to Sderot now is about 80%, according to Moshe there, about 80%. So that would mean, what, 20-something thousand people are now back in Sderot. Now, as we were driving around today, it was pretty hard to get a sense for how many people are actually there, because it was Shabbat and it was 9 million degrees outside. And so the only place I could find where there were people outside was at the swimming pool. And that's why you saw the footage there of the people out there swimming. That was in Sderot today that I filmed that. And so it was hard to gauge just how many people have come back and whether or not that 80% number is correct. But there were a lot of full parking lots in the apartment buildings that we drove by. There were still a lot of shuttered windows, but sometimes people shutter their windows just to keep the heat out. And that's understandable, because it was brutally hot down there today. And that led me to say to Oscar, if they asked me if I wanted to move back here, I would say no as well, but it wouldn't be because of the rockets. I'm not near as upset about the rockets as I am about the heat. I think the heat is probably more of a threat to my safety and way of life and comfort than the rockets are. And I would rather live in Kyiv, where there are rockets coming in every day, and not as many, they don't have an Iron Dome system. They have a lot of air assets or air defense assets there now, but not like Israel. But even still, I don't like hot weather like that. Ugh, that was brutal. It was so hot. It was, I don't know what temperature it was, but I mean, we're talking like Texas hot. And if it's Texas hot, I don't want to be there. So I just said that because I know Scott Estep is watching, and he lives in San Antonio area. One of my best friends in the whole wide world right there watching the live. Good to see you, Scott. Scott's coming with us on our tour to Israel in October. Donna Whitfield says, no AC, Chuck. Yes, but I don't like AC. I would much prefer to live in a place where you don't need AC, and I do. My home in Panama is up in the mountains, and the temperature rarely gets up into the mid-80s. It's typically in the 60s at night and the mid-70s to mid-80s in the daytime. It rarely goes, I don't think it ever gets over 90 there. And so we have air conditioning at the house, but we don't use it. We just leave the doors and windows open all the time, day and night, and just use a fan. And I love that much more than living in air conditioning. At my home in West Virginia, we didn't run the air conditioner when we lived there much at all. It does get hotter and stickier there than it does in Panama, but we would just get accustomed to it. And I was cheap, and I didn't want my kids getting soft, so we just left the air conditioner off and left the doors and windows wide open. And you know what? When you got kids in the house, your doors and windows are going to be wide open anyway, because kids can't shut windows and doors. It's almost impossible to get them to keep them shut, especially if you're paying to cool the house. Kids have an innate ability to sense that it's costing you money, and so they leave the doors and windows wide open. As a dad, it's my job to complain about that sort of thing, and so I just removed the problem by turning off the AC altogether. It would concern me personally to live in a place where you must have AC to survive, because it's always possible that the power goes out, and there are 1,000 reasons why it could go out for a month. And I've seen places like hurricanes and stuff like that, tornadoes, like down in Louisiana, Mississippi, where your house goes a week without power and they're not built to get a lot of ventilation anymore because everybody has air conditioning. So a hurricane hits, your house goes a week without power, and your house is wrecked. You've got to replace the sheetrock, you got to replace the carpets because mold starts instantly in there, and your house is done, and people die in those things. So personally, I don't like living in a place where I'm reliant on electricity to survive. Now, in the case of my buddy Scott, he's an Okie, and Okies can survive anywhere on planet Earth or Mars, and so it's not a problem for him. So, now, new evacuation orders on the north, Zoran says, according to India Today and Sky News. Haven't seen that, but we can look over the news real quick. But first of all, I want to go back and finish up with these rocket attacks and people moving back to Sderot. So many people are not happy with losing that subsidy from the government, losing their free place to stay in a hotel, even though it wasn't super comfortable to stay in a hotel for 10 months. A lot of people are not happy about, having that yanked out from under them. And a lot of them have gone back to Sderot. Like I said, the numbers are, I'm being told, about 80%. And here's an interesting thing that I mentioned on my Newsmax Live today. Psychologists did a study of children in Sderot and found that they believe about 50% of them suffer from some sort of post-traumatic stress just from living under the threat of rocket fire day in and day out all the time for their entire lives. There's also an elevated rate of miscarriages, an elevated rate of depression there, and they liken that to, or connect that to the threat that these people live under all the time. I would connect it to the unbelievable heat outside, but I'm not a psychologist. So there you go. All right. Let's just look and see if there is some breaking news here. First of all, I wanted to show you on the map before I do that of Sderot, where it is, so that you can kind of understand what we're talking about here. So if I can move this over a little bit. Here is the northern end of Gaza. You see this 1950 armistice agreement line is right there. And Sderot is the nearest city right here. We went to Givat Kobe today. This is the overlook we were on. And this is what it looks like from there. And this is what Gaza looks like from up there, or looked like back then, before the war. All these buildings that you see out here, I'll zoom in a little bit, that are all these buildings are intact. That's Beit Hanun, and that's 1 mile almost exactly from this overlook. And here's the fence that they had between Gaza and Israel. Okay, so you see that. That gives you an idea of what it used to look like. Now, I want to see if I can, I'm just looking through here, see if anybody has put up one from after the war. Otherwise, I will try to show you one of mine. So let me go here, and we'll go into studio mode, and I will add a, let's see, let's take that away. You guys just look at that for a second while I add a picture taken from the same spot today. I just got to go find that photo real quick. So bear with me. Oh, I know what I did with it. Oh, just almost did the wrong thing. So I just got to go through here and find, let's see, date modified today. Okay. So we got to go here and find this photograph. Where are we? There it is. Okay. I oh, I think I just took. Oh, there we go. This is well. Okay, so I'm gonna put these back, and then I will put them here. All right, so cancel that. Stand by, be patient, hold on. I would have done this sooner, but okay, so I'll put this one in first, and let's transition to that now. Okay, so this is looking through the scope at Beit Hanun. I lost it. There we go. You can see there's buildings like leaning sideways, blown up, everything like that. And yeah, just a lot of rubble. Just a lot of rubble. But you can also see that there are some buildings still intact out there. Like I said, I don't know what shape they're in, but this dirt in the foreground is from them bulldozing everything. I'm going to go back to the map here so you can take a look at this again. Let's zoom in. This is the area that they were that I was looking at there, and now it's pretty well wrecked. Pretty well wrecked. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting, and but we didn't get shot at from up there. We didn't have to have body armor on, and that's an improvement. Okay, so I'm just going to check here and real quick try to see if I can answer your question about whether or not there's some new warnings in the north. There's some stuff that just came out from Hezbollah, but I'm not seeing new evacuation warnings in the north. There were some drone attacks and rocket attacks on Saturday. There were 55 rockets fired at the northern Israeli kibbutz called Ayelet HaShahar today, and they claimed that was in retaliation for an Israeli airstrike which killed at least 10 people and injured 5 others. The IDF stated that the strike had targeted Hezbollah weapons depot. The kibbutz is about 10 kilometers from the Lebanese border and what is not in one of the areas that has been evacuated. So they were shooting at a town that is outside of the evacuated zone. So that's the latest from up there. Okay, so we've been going for, what do we got, like 40 minutes? Let's see if we got any other questions here. And then, yeah, sorry, I don't run this studio mode very well because I haven't used that a lot before. I'm getting the hang of it though. Do any travel to Israel now? Yeah, well, like I said, we ran into a group of Indonesian ladies who came here to pray for Israel, and they were out there with their little sun hats on, no body armor, standing on the border of Israel today, praying and singing and playing the guitar and stuff. So yeah, there are people coming, for sure. Let's see. If Lebanon doesn't want to claim Hezbollah, why are they not going after them themselves? One time, Mama, because the Lebanese military is stratospherically weak, just absolutely terribly weak, and even more corrupt than it is weak. And so they would, if they went up against Hezbollah, they would lose. So that's why. That's why they haven't done that. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Looking for questions here. If you have a question, please put it in all caps. And Israel said they would respond to a missile attack swiftly and immediately. These attacks may be coming from proxies, but all are essentially Iranian ordered. Why doesn't Israel respond? Israel is responding to the attacks that are happening against it on a daily basis. They are bombing inside Gaza and inside Lebanon all day, every day. I mean, it's just sort of a continuous thing. There's when we were on the border up on that overlook, we just were listening to bombs and machine guns and fighting going on off in the distance, and so that's obviously continuing in Gaza, but it's also continuing in the north, and so now this is getting really complicated because Hezbollah has said that they are going to launch a massive strike against Israel in response for the killing of Fuad Shukr. And now, today, they launched 55 rockets and said, well, that wasn't the response for Shukr. That was the response for this other, bombing that you guys did that killed some other people. So they're trying to like parse their retaliation to the retaliation of the retaliation, which was a retaliation for the previous retaliation, and it's getting really confusing. So I think even Hezbollah is like, wait, which one are we retaliating for now? We're just shooting bombs here at Israel. Why don't we just say we're at war? That's kind of what it seems like to me. Thank you for praying for peace in Israel. Let's see, looking for any other questions. Will you be doing a live about Ukraine moving their tanks in Russia and on a potential coup in Russia? Yes, I will. Phoenix Rising. After this, let's see, in about 20 minutes, I'll be going live on my channel, The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube. And maybe if One Tired Mama could put the link up to that, then I'll be talking about Ukraine over there. I expect to have probably 12 people watching because nobody likes talking about Ukraine, but there are some very interesting things happening in Ukraine right now. And I think it's becoming clearer why Ukraine decided to attack the Kursk region now and do it in the way that they did it. So we'll talk about that on my channel here in just a few minutes. See, Bibi's office says Israeli negotiators briefed Netanyahu that they've careful optimism about the possibility of moving forward, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I saw that, Snow White, and I also saw where Hamas said, nope, we're not going to accept the deal. So, yes, it is interesting times, for sure, for sure. Okay, so I'm going to just close it out now because I'm going to get a drink before I go live on my channel. And so thank you for watching. We're going to pray real quick. Here's a question. Is all of this claiming or denying for hits, for prosecution, protection, for war crimes, or just because it's their excuse for shooting to be shooting? I'm not sure what your question is asking, KP. Sorry about that. Do we know what the terms of the ceasefire that was rejected were? Well, Israel has said that they will not agree to a ceasefire unless it gives them the ability to restart the war if Hamas doesn't live up to its to what it agrees to. And Hamas says, no, that's a non-starter for us. If we break our word, you can't come back and restart the war again. And there's another question. Do you think the UN should be kicked out of the U.S. since the UN told Iran to attack Israel? A lot of people would like to defund the UN and kick them out. The only problem with that is that then somebody else would come in and take our place, and we would have that much less sway over anything that happens on planet Earth. And so it's kind of both the choices are bad, but there you go. Thank you, Chuck. Interactive News. Okay. Hamas or hummus? I prefer hummus. Me too. Okay, let's pray. Lord God, thank you so much for sending people from Indonesia even to come here to Israel and pray for the return of the hostages and for the peace of this land. We do pray, Lord, that you would release those hostages in a mighty and supernatural way. You would allow them to be released alive and come home to their families. Lord, I pray that they would feel our prayers, that they would know that we are begging for their release, and they would know that that people around the world are praying for them and praying for wisdom for the leadership of Israel. And so, Father, I just ask that you would end this war your way, in your timing, and do it in a way that preserves your people. Thank you so much for allowing me the privilege to be here and to see it with my own eyes and to bring this information to people. I pray that you bless the people who are listening as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. We will see you again probably on either tomorrow or Monday, depending on what happens.